Welcome back to Inside the Plant, brought to you by United Prairie, your source for real-world agronomy insights, fertilizer updates, and conversations with the people out here in the field making it happen every day. Hopefully you're liking our new intro music. And I'm Josh Rund, and today's episode is going to appeal to more than just the farm crowd. We have had some interesting and intense weather patterns here in Central Illinois, and there's no better person to talk to about the weather and agriculture than WCIA and Central Illinois' own Jacob Dickey. Jacob, thanks for taking the time to visit with me today. So let's start out by just telling our audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Gibson City, Ford County, and grew up there. And my family's involvement in agriculture goes way back, actually. Both my parents came from family farms. I was the first generation removed. The McGee side, my mom's side, we actually have traced that lineage back to the 1800s in Vermilion County. And we had to hire a lawyer way back in the day. There's a cool story about that. The lawyer had to save the family farm from a promissory note that wasn't paid back by a neighbor for $10 whole. And that was a lot of money back then. And the documents actually have Abe Lincoln's signature on them.
No kidding,
yeah.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's on my mom's side. My dad's side is from the Auburn Pawnee area. Dickey John is an ag company down there that was founded by my grandfather. They had the first moisture tester for soil way back in the day, and they do a lot of different parts and things of that. That company's divested away from the family at this point. But rich history in agriculture. My wife and I, Amy, we live in Champaign-Urbana area, and we have a dog, Vinny, and we really enjoy traveling. She's got a little travel business, and I do the weather. So that's what we got going on.
Awesome. That sounds great. So Jacob, how did you get started here at WCIA? What brought you here?
Well, I think about everyone who grew up watching WCIA in the 80s and 90s. You watch Robert Reese and Judy Frazier and those people, and every kid wanted to be like Robert Reese, right? I mean, he was just
100%, yeah.
Yeah. And so I had the chance to be a kidcaster. They had a program called the Kidcaster, and we still do it occasionally today, pending corporate bureaucracy. But when it comes to that, it's a chance to bring kids in and do the weather on TV. And I had the chance to do that. My fifth grade teacher nominated me, and that was kind of my first TV taste. Even before that, I was a weather watcher for Judy, though. And I remember the old login portal when I was in third grade. It was like this archaic HTML website, like somebody designed it on Microsoft Word, and it had a login portal, and you put your username and password in, and it was something super simple. And then there was a single box. What's your report? Type in your information in there and send it off, and then watch the news at 6 and see if Judy reported the weather. And she had weather watchers all over the area. So that goes way back for that. Through the years, then I stayed connected actually with the Champaign County Farm Bureau. Steve Ayers often had me come on and do the Ag Answers in the morning. They had that segment during the 5 o'clock hour for years. And partially think maybe he didn't want to get up every morning or, every week. Yeah. I mean, it's
Jacob do it. It'll be fine.
It really is. But Steve was really gracious and gave me the chance with my FFA experience and background to come in and talk about agriculture and inform people about that. Went to college for ag education, my undergrad, and I student taught and chatted and just decided, teaching maybe at this point wasn't for me. Still, maybe have the ability to go back one day, but very connected in agriculture there. But agriculture and weather is very married together.
So
there's a lot going on there. Got back to WCI as an intern in 2016 with Derek Faber. And then they hired me on in 2020. And so it's been great to be back home.
Awesome. And we're thankful that you're here. My kids, I've got a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. And I told him today I'm going to WCIA to interview Jacob Dickey. And my son had a slew of questions for me as I was walking out the door. So he was excited that I was coming up here to talk with you. So
did you tell him the stories? Because listeners here may not know, Josh and I go way back,
We do. We
have a little history. And,
back to Jacob's ag education days.
Yeah.
And spending time, went to college, was in school with my brother and some other students that I used to teach. And so, a lot of good, a lot of fun.
I think you told me to not say I decided not to teach because of, what you told me. Is that right?
Probably. Some of those stories, that come out, about Luke and Austin, all those guys. For sure.
Shout out to that.
But I would say, Jacob, your ties to agriculture, I think, is something that our listeners sometimes forget about. When they're watching you on WCIA, giving the newscast and doing the storm chasing and things like that, people forget how involved you are in our industry. And part of that is with the Farm Bureau and the Farm Bureau Foundation and your Ag in the Classroom segment that you do with Sarah Caper. Tell us a little bit about that and how that's going.
Yeah, so during the school year, we bring in Sarah and Julie from the Champaign County Farm Bureau Ag in the Classroom program, and they are great. I mean, I just think it's great to tell folks at home who are watching, hey, this is what your kids are learning in school, and those teachers go out. And we just have Champaign County during the school year. We're in the summertime, we bring other counties in, and everywhere's got a coordinator. So it's a great way to just connect agriculture. And I think the audience engagement that's actually been really well. A lot of people really enjoy watching it.
Yeah.
The target audience in the morning show when it airs at 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. is either parents at home getting ready for the day and they're getting ready to get their kids up and out the door, or at 9 a.m. A lot of times there's grandparents watching or stay-at-home moms, and there's activities they can do, things they learn, things like that. So it's kind of fun to have that connection. It's been fun. Even I learn some things every now and then from that segment. And Sarah and Julie are fantastic at what they do with the Farm Bureau Foundation here in Champaign County.
Oh yeah, they're great. They're great at what we do. We really enjoy working with them. We're very blessed to have people in our community like them and like yourself that have got ties to agriculture, and then also have ties in other areas as well that are beneficial. And so we've talked a lot, Jacob, about your past, your ties to agriculture, how you've gotten here. What's the future holding for you? What's your next big thing coming up for you that you can tell us about?
Yeah, well, a couple things that I do on the side. I teach at Parkland College, and I really enjoy that. I teach an intro weather class there, and that's really fun. It's kind of a little side gig that still involved in weather and just teaching the next generation. And a lot of students come into that class, and they're very interested in weather from the start. Sometimes I think, and I remember when I student taught, I felt this way and whatnot. You get students who are there because it's an easy class, and you get students who are there because they heard it was fun, or et cetera, et cetera. I find a lot of students in this class usually have some sort of weather experience in the past that they're interested in. I've had students who have survived some pretty big tornadoes and have some crazy stories from that. I've had students, their grandparents lived in Florida and a hurricane washed their home away. They've been involved in big flooding, and they have a little bit of a fear of that. So it's really cool the demographic I get in that class, because I usually feel like a vast majority of them are at least connected some way to some big event. But also weather affects everyone, right? There's not a 100%. Single person who is not impacted by weather in some way, shape, or form. And they can relate to that a lot better than they can, what happens when you combine hydrogen and, chlorine and, chemical elements, things like that. Sometimes that's a little foreign. Weather and space are the two things I think people can always connect with, or 95% plus.
Oh, yeah.
A chance to relate to.
Yeah. Well, I know every time I see you on TV and my wife is sitting there, and we've got our kids at home, and there's a storm event coming through, and we're getting the alerts on our phone to go to the basement. And so my wife and kids go to the basement, but where do the guys go?
We go outside.
We go outside.
Yeah,
I go outside. I built my house in Tolono with my back porch facing the west so that I could watch the storms roll in.
Sit in your comfy chair, right?
Oh, yeah. Sit on the back until the rain pours in, and then lightning strikes, then I got to go inside.
Then you finally got to go.
Then I got to go in. So,
the wife's yelling at you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, then I get the phone calls that come downstairs.
Soon you're going to have your kids coming out, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. My son, he wants to go out now, for sure.
Yeah.
He wants to go see, because it's interesting, right? The cloud formations. My son's very interested in the weather and tornadoes, things like that. I mean, kids are watching that stuff on YouTube now, things that I didn't have when I was growing up. Kids have got access to now.
I don't even know if the internet was around when you were a kid.
No, I don't think so. I mean, we were still typing on stone tablets back in the day, Jacob. It was still useful for us. So
the teaching thing's one of the big ones. The other thing is, I always had a childhood dream to own a car wash one day. So my wife and I have bought a car wash, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, we own a car wash in Newman, Illinois, and little 3-bay car wash, a little fun. It's kind of a hobby job, and I go there and do the cleaning and care for things. And I've got a high school FFA student who helps out too, just on the weekends and whatnot. But it's kind of nice because now when it comes to it, everyone always knows in the wintertime when we predict winter storms, the meteorologists get our payouts from bread, milk, and eggs. Well, the salt industry is also helping us
right
out
in there.
A little paycheck from them at the car wash business.
Awesome. Good.
Hey, spread some more salt. Then you can buy Vinny's car wash.
That's funny. So I'm super glad you said that, because my dad's from Newman. And so when he heard that someone had bought that car wash, and then he heard, you'd be like, my dad was like, surely it's not Jacob Dickey that bought the car wash. So I'm like, I don't know, but when I'm there, I might say something.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. So my dad will listen to this and get it.
I get to be outside, and it's nice. I feel like, anyone who's got a passion or something, and if there's a job, when I like the car wash is almost a chance for me to just do some manual labor and not have to think a whole lot, right? It's not using my brain, I'm using my body. And boy, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of learning still, but we really enjoyed having that as part of
Awesome.
what we do.
Cool.
There
That's
you go.
awesome.
There's your answer.
I do. I like that. That's your
We
next
can
big
fit
push.
short bed crew cab trucks in the automatic bay for any farmers watching. But if you got a bigger truck, just use the seltzer bed.
Okay, fair enough. So Jacob Dickey's involved with water all over the place, whether it's rain or at
That's
the car
true.
wash. He's involved.
Right. Well, monopolize that as well.
Yeah,
I didn't even think about that.
Awesome. So cool. So let's talk, Jacob, about your process here at WCIA. What's the process you go through when you're getting ready to do your forecast? What's your prep work look like?
Yeah, a normal day is you come in and, I say a normal day. I don't feel like there's normal days around here that often, right? Something's going on, breaking news, weather, someone's gone, you're filling in, things like that. But typically you're going to come in and forecast within a couple of hours of your first show. I'll use my Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 a.m., kind of as a demonstration, but I've switched right now to mornings and still helping out in the weekends. But, I'll come in and I'll forecast and update numbers and look at that forecast. A lot of times, if it's quieter weather, we don't have to spend nearly as much time. We're focused more on the impactful days. So severe weather expected 3 days from now, we're going to spend a lot more time looking at that forecast and trying to nail that down. A day that's sunny, I don't think there's much difference in people's minds if it's sunny and 75 or sunny and 78, right? The need to be that specific doesn't require a large amount of time versus, okay, where's this cold front coming through? Where's that instability going to be? How's the wind shear going to pivot through the area during the day? We have to do a lot more work on those more active weather days. And the same for winter storms, right? Track of the low. Okay, how's warm air aloft going to impact our snow growth ratios, our snow growth zones? Is it going to be a wet snow, a light snow? Is it going to be windy? There's a lot of different details on those higher impact days that we focus on. So that's probably the bigger chunk of things. When we had drought for months and months and months, sometimes it'd take 15, 20 minutes and numbers wouldn't change a whole lot. You'd be expecting it to be warmer than the guidance suggests because the ground's so dry, there's no moisture to absorb that heat. So, kind of look for some nuances and things like that, some little tricks and skills. Come up with those numbers, put that forecast together. We have a pretty good system set up where we've got our graphics, build our hits for the show, and then we've got our shows. But we also are making sure web graphics are updating, app alerts are in place, web forecast videos, all kinds of stuff like that happen. And that's probably the biggest chunk of the day for prep work. But it's a lot of hurry up and wait, I'd say. Hurry up for a show, come in, and then during shows, usually I've got time to grade some exams or
do some of those
check
kind
some
of
cameras,
things.
Whatever the case may be, things like that.
Hurry up and wait.
Some other things.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what other industry I've heard hurry up and wait in. Oh yeah, it's agriculture.
That's
what we do all the time, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good tie-in. I like that. And so Jacob, one of the things I feel like lately, especially I hear a lot is people talking about they want to see the word climate all the time. And like, this is due to climate change. The climate around here is moving. What in your opinion, with your background, what is the big difference between weather and climate, and what are we getting wrong when we talk about it?
Yeah, well, I'll just start with the simple definition that I teach students in class. So weather is day to day, right? Monday, what's the weather? Tuesday, what's the weather? Climate is a long-term average of that weather over a lot of years. Typically, the standard is 30 years, and that gives us an idea of how things are. Climate has always changed. It will always change. Weather has a lot of variability, and we see both of those things happening in that. One of the simple ways that I like to talk whenever I come up to climate change, and this can be a tough argument for agriculture communities. It really can.
Sure.
I've walked into some rooms and we're going to ask you questions about climate change and things of that. And a lot of times I have to try and make people separate the political version of climate change from the basic, simple scientific definition of climate change.
Yes.
And a lot of the controversy to me comes from, okay, I think a lot of us understand there are changes happening, but why that's happening is where things can get really political and really sour. And I'm not an expert in that part of things.
Yeah, the political realm is not our forte.
Right.
Yeah.
There's always big money driving things, and you just don't know what to trust these days when it comes to that. But when we look at climate change as a whole, one of the simplest ways that I can explain that is we can look at crops and corn and beans specifically today. Modern agriculture has really made those, corn and beans very efficient water movers. if we look at yields from the last 50 to 70 years, average yields in the 1970s were what, 130,
Yeah.
140
Yep.
bushels approximately. What are we averaging today?
No, I mean we've
It's a
got
bad year
corn.
if you got 250, right?
Yeah, and you're putting, and that's with bad weather. Yeah, even.
Yeah. So the yields themselves have increased, and if you have higher yields, you need more water. So we're moving a lot more water through the water cycle here locally. That has actually played a role in our climate overall here. And I'm not saying this is the worst thing ever, and farmers are destroying, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, look, we do something, it usually has a reaction, right? If you do something at home, sometimes there's and if you're making a recipe, if you put some extra salt in, oh no, you might have a reaction, it's too salty. There's always change in everything.
Yeah.
There's a cause and effect relationship. So the specific example with that is back in the 1970s, and we'll even go back 1950s, 1930s, dew point values rarely got above the mid 70s here in Central Illinois. We didn't get those muggy days. It was a lot drier around here, in fact, and our rainfall totals have actually increased a bit, several inches since in the last 50 years. And a lot of that is just because of evapotranspiration. Crops are moving a lot more water. They're releasing that water. You hear corn sweat.
Yep,
Legitimately, that is a thing here. And when you take that corn sweat overall, it used to be we would hit 100 degrees a lot more regularly in Central Illinois. So technically, by definition, temperature-wise, our summers are a bit cooler than they were in the 1930s through 50s and into the 70s. We don't hit those days. The reason being is when you heat up the air, you heat up the air and the water vapor. So we can't put as much heat energy into just the air because we also have to heat water. And it takes a while to heat water up. There's a lot of energy required to do that there. So we're no longer seeing 100-degree days plus. Very rarely do we officially get to that. The car thermometers say that sometimes, but they're way off. That's another conversation.
Yeah.
But instead, now we're seeing a lot more 90-degree days in the 90s, but the moisture in place makes it feel like the heat index values are way higher. We're seeing a lot more 120s, and occasionally we get close to 130 with those heat index values if it's a brutally humid day out there. So just corn and beans, more efficient crops, moving more water. Our temperatures are technically a little cooler in the summer. However, the heat stress, both on humans and crops, is becoming more of an issue because those heat index values are climbing. That's a really simple way of putting it there. Another simple way is if you look at a temperature map in the summertime, late at night, look at the urban areas, then look at the rural areas. In Chicago, sometimes at 9, 10 p.m., it's still close to 90 degrees in a heat index, in a heat wave. Downstate, we don't have all that concrete and steel. We'll sometimes be a bit cooler than it is in the big cities. 150 years ago, Chicago did not have concrete and skyscrapers and all that other stuff. That local climate has changed just because of modern infrastructure, buildings, things of that. So we see climate is changing in various different ways. And you add all those little changes, it does cause bigger changes over time. That's usually where I put the period on the conversation, because once the politicians and big money gets involved, you kind of lose the messaging, and it really gets people very worked up. But another third example, if there's some farmers who are listening who remember the 70s, the ground used to freeze pretty solidly around here. And it used to be frozen 12, 18 inches down. Hardly do we hear of a deep freeze into the ground. And we're seeing a lot of changes with disease management, insect management, things like that. There's all these changes that are happening because the ground is not freezing like it used to. Yeah. And that's just another change that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. That's a great perspective. Things you don't think about, we don't think about the difference because I'm just looking at the weather here in Central Illinois. Yeah. I'm not looking at Chicago or LA or some of those bigger cities, like you said, that have all that concrete, that steel that's going to absorb and hold that heat. And that has a big effect on, probably part of the rest of us too. So I like that perspective there. And so talking about the weather and the climate, this spring and leading up to it has been a challenge. We've had a lot of severe weather, a lot of tornadoes. You've put a lot of miles on your car going down through Effingham and Shelbyville and those places.
Many hours.
Yeah. Are we, what is the big reason, Jacob, that we saw that drought early and then now we've had more rain than a lot of places can handle?
Yeah, it's been such a dramatic flip. And the instant thing you hear is, climate change has caused all of that. Really, when it comes to that, we need to let the data parse itself out. We're not finding as much correlation directly with climate change as of now. And that could change. The bigger thing we're seeing, though, is we're actually having more torrential rain. And so it's not as much of just a light rain shower anymore. The rainfall rates are actually increasing in these storms, so you get more rainfall in shorter periods of time. And that's something that we've noted in the data recently, and some of that's because there's just more water vapor moving on through. When it comes to severe weather and things of that, so far, the data doesn't suggest climate change. And when you look at spring tornadoes, no one tornado is the product of climate change, right? That's not how that works. Really, our active pattern, I tend to believe weather is very cyclical. And anyone who's listening, the 60s and 70s were pretty terrible tornado years around here. There were some monster tornadoes that came through this area. It seems like every 40, 50 years, you kind of get a big swing. And we're kind of right in time.
We're right on that cycle.
Yeah. So, 1976, Sonoras got wiped out. Ogden got hit then. A lot of people forget about that because they remember 96 in Ogden. 1961 brought tornadoes through the area. 1967, I believe it was, Sonoras had a tornado about a decade before that hit there. And so we just see these bigger tornadoes. And I think we're just in one of those more active stretches. A lot of those types of things are more happening because of large-scale weather patterns moving around, specifically with the ocean temperatures. That El Nino, La Nina. Those are two words a lot of times people hear. In Illinois, we tend to be very vulnerable in the springtime in transition years when we go from one to the other. Or we also find that La Nina can help increase our severe weather potential, particularly in the wintertime. But we are seeing more wintertime events in recent years. Officially, I talked to Dr. Trent Ford, and officially the numbers aren't statistically significant enough to say, yes, this is a change in climate. But we are seeing trends where there are more tornadoes in the wintertime. And Judy Frazier, I talk to her every now and then, she just tells me when she was here, she rarely remembers wintertime tornado events. Some of our biggest tornado outbreaks in the last 2 decades have been in the wintertime. We've had our fair share in the spring and summer. This year, by far, proves that. But if you think back over the last 15 years, you had the Petersburg tornado that hit the lake, and that was in, I believe, 2010. You had the November 17th, 2013. You say that day, a lot of people remember around here. December 1st, 2018. Our largest January tornado outbreak on record, January 3rd, 2023. And that's for the month of January, that is to clarify. We're seeing a lot more of that because what happens is these pattern changes put the jet stream more overhead. And traditionally in the wintertime, the jet stream is more active overhead. We used to have big winter storms. Storms tracks brought them through our area now. But as things have warmed a bit, warmer ocean waters allowing for more instability, water vapor to move north, and you get warmer temperatures because of that and other factors. Now we're putting really strong wind shear aloft, and we're putting instability at the surface. And when you get that combination, when we see those wintertime events, it doesn't take much fuel to tap into that impressive wind shear and produce some significant severe weather. And we certainly have seen that. I think another thing, the Gulf of Mexico is quite warm. And whenever the Gulf of Mexico is warm, typically in the southeast United States, the Great Lakes, the Midwest, you'll see a lot more transport of humid air. Humid air is instability as well. So we're getting more of those spring and summer events in the recent years. I think that's also playing a role in that. And will it quiet down? Well, I think there's some questions coming up about that later. But I'll say this. The other thing that stuck out to me this year is we had some big hail early on.
Yeah, some hail I've never seen, like taking up the palm of somebody's hand type hail.
And that's not something that actually surprises me at all. That's related to the drought conditions out west. Hail formation typically is happening, think of snow's forming up a lot, same with hail, right? So we're up high in the thunderstorms. What happens is the Great Plains is higher elevation as you head into the Rockies than we are here. And you get that hot, dry air that forms out there. They're in drought. Well, it gets advected east and to the north and east, and that layer of hot, dry air kind of turns out to be elevated in the middle part of the atmosphere where hail formation is more important. Hail doesn't do well in hot, humid weather. You typically don't get, on a hot summer day, much hail. You can get some pea size and things like that, but when you have dry air aloft, it's really favorable for hail because you're not having a lot of water that's colliding and reducing it. The hail formation literally is coming from what little moisture is as a gas, and it's subliming on those hailstones and growing. Sometimes you can have riming with liquid too, but it really likes that hot, dry weather. So when there's drought out in the Great Plains, there's a correlation, and early in the spring, you'll see more big hail events. May and June have been really quiet hail months. There's not been hail larger than 5 inches anywhere in the month of May or June, in the United States. But we had lots of that in March and April, and including here in Central Illinois.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing pictures of people's yards that looked like it had been a snowstorm out there, but they were
Yeah.
just massive pieces of hail. It was wild.
And I remember some of those too. It was like, it took me about a half an hour to realize that was hail. I thought it was just debris and insulation when I was in a tornado damage and wasn't looking at that much. I was like, wait a minute, that's hail on the ground. Some 5-6 inch hail reports up in Keck. It was wild to see that.
Yeah, that's crazy. And one of the things too, Jacob, dealing with the weather and how it comes out here from the west too, is in ag retail, our focus is not typically on the rain and the weather, but the wind. In the wind, I feel like the last 2 seasons, even some of our most veteran operators and people in our company have been like, it's been the windiest I've ever seen the past 2 springs. Is there a reason we're seeing that uptick in the wind?
Well, farmers keep putting those big fans on their property.
Yeah, the windmills.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding about that. Someone's going to hear that and snip that, and that's a soundbite. And
that'll be on national news later this evening.
Oh, man, here we go, right? No, the jet stream, again, is one of the big reasons for that. The jet stream basically is how storm systems move, and when we're closer to that, we're seeing bigger changes in pressure. So bigger swings. You can think of it as, if you think of an elevation, let's look at a mountain and a valley. The air at the top of the mountain, or maybe we don't even think of it as air, let's just think if you're in the sandbox. Who doesn't like a sandbox, right? We got kids at home, they're digging. If you put a pile of sand in one and you're digging from a hole in the next, the greater you make that incline, the more sand that's going to start to roll off that mountain and down into that valley. Weather is very much the same. The low pressure systems are literal valleys of air in the atmosphere. High pressure systems are mountains. And when that gradient is a lot tighter, that air wants to move a lot quicker to fill that. All the weather is trying to do is get into equilibrium. And for some reason, there's an energy inequality between that. And those high pressures and low pressures, when you have a strong high close to a strong low, the jet stream's rolling on through, we'll see those wind conditions often picking up. So that's very much tied to just these changes in La Nina, El Nino, put the jet stream over the Great Lakes and move those storm systems on through. And it's not something that I'm surprised at all seeing either.
Okay. Do you think, is that something too, Jacob, as you think about the future forecast, like looking at the fall, looking at even next spring, is that something that you can kind of predict is going to be maybe the same, or do you think it'll change depending on if the jet stream moves?
Well, typically El Nino, we're rolling into El Nino, and there's been a lot of talk about this being a super El Nino. One, to be upfront, there's not a lot of data on super El Ninos, right? We don't get those all the time. To be of that strength. We get El Nino quite frequently, but we're talking like, this is Popeye the Sailor Man eating the spinach and boom type of, imagine if Chris Farley were having to do that today.
Oh yeah.
Talking about, I am El Nino.
Yeah. Van down by the river.
He'd have to be jacked out of his mind to be this kind of El Nino rolling on through. So typically what we find, the transition from La Nina to El Nino, first off, there's a bit of a delay in how that impacts things. So March, April, and May, we're actually still kind of under the influence of La Nina around here. Now we're starting to see that transition impact towards neutral. There's a little bit of a lag. It takes time for the atmosphere to respond. At some point, I think the atmosphere shuts off. And to me, flash drought is a concern this fall. We've had the last couple of years where flash drought has happened. And, you talk about going from no rain to a ton of rain and back to no rain. Like that kind of makes sense. We're going this pattern that we've had there. The changes have been a bit more impressive in how fast we've moved through them. I did a talk in January, and I was like, we kind of hope we can linger in neutral conditions for a little while longer. There's in my mind, a decent chance between August and September, sometime in there, things probably turn dry and drought becomes, it's hard to think about right now. Like, what, drought? Yeah, things may end up turning a little bit dry on that. Once you get late summer into the fall, El Nino tends to favor quieter conditions. And even in the wintertime around here, a normal El Nino lends itself to be a milder, I won't say warmer, because people hear warmer, and we're not talking Bahamas warmth around here. But maybe a little bit milder and a little less active of a winter. There are some nuances, though. This El Nino may be a little different, and where it actually allows for cold shots to move into wintertime. Similar to last year, we had some cold weather this past winter.
We did, very cold.
Yeah, and you can kind of get those shots to return if that. It all has to do with where that core of the warm water in the ocean is, and we're still trying to figure that out. But that's something to consider. If you get those cold shots, you're still going to tend to be drier, but maybe that allows for the overlap. You happen to get a storm system, and you have the cold air. Maybe that's going to allow for still drier conditions, but more snow not necessarily than average, but maybe you can put some more snow, because sometimes El Nino years can be a bit snowless around here. So that's the one thing that sticks out to me with that. And the other thing too is when you look at those flash drought ideas, is you've got a lot of sunshine, it's a windy day. There's different things that play a role in that. That may continue into the wintertime where we stay dry, or by next spring, maybe we're staring down that drought. It felt like the most recent drought kind of lingered. It just never fully went away, right? It's like a bad case of lice.
Until it went away.
Yeah,
and
then
we
went away.
Then we kicked up and we
we
turned
got
the
some
faucet
prescription
on.
grade medicine to kick that thing to the curb. Yeah. The interesting thing, though, and I don't think a lot of people have talked about it much yet, is we're talking about super El Nino, but then as we head into the spring of next year and summer, it actually tries to, some of the forecast guidance tries to, as quick as it came, do the opposite and make it go away and back to transition. So maybe that allows for next year, if we're still in drought, and this is some early speculation, I haven't fully made up my mind and I don't know if I trust it, but I see that big trend back towards neutral and La Nina. And if that trend were to continue, maybe we're seeing another swing like that next spring. And that big transition also may open the door for more severe weather next spring, right? Again, it's still early. Someone's listening now and they're going to be like, man, you said this back in summer of 2026. Hey, I just got to be right half the time. Isn't that right? Is that how that goes?
Well, if someone's going back next spring and listening to this podcast, then we're doing something good. We're kicking things off well.
We'll check the receipts here. But that transition back kind of stands out to me. And I'm thinking, okay, depending on how quick we go back, you're just in a whiplash, right? So we're either going to get too much rain or not enough and things like that. But that's kind of what I've been seeing in the crystal ball, catching my attention. Still a lot of time to figure things out. I think we're just finally realizing, okay, this is going to be a pretty big El Nino. What's that mean for us? And, how that plays a role in our temperatures and precip. But on average, it tends to lean towards drier conditions, and you usually shut that switch off. And then temperatures in the wintertime, mild is, we could spend a whole nother set of questions on averages. Above average, below average, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if you're wanting to dive into that.
Well, honestly, Jacob, but my next piece is thinking about the average farmer or the average person. When we're sitting there watching you or watching Kevin on the newscast, what should we be paying attention to help us become more aware of the weather, more adaptable to what's going on?
Yeah. So when you think about average weather, farmer specific, I know they're looking at rain chances. The one thing I do really dislike is the use of percentages. I don't think a lot of people understand.
100%. I'm one of those people.
Yeah,
so
40% chance of rain. We could have a 100% chance of rain. It only has to rain everywhere for 5 minutes in order to achieve that. And sometimes we have days like that, right? Where the probability of rain is really high, but it's either a quick line coming on through and 22 of the 24 hours are dry. That's a lot different than a high chance of precip, and it's a slow, steady rain throughout the day. So listen for terms more focused on timing and also coverage: isolated, scattered, numerous, widespread. I think we all know a scattered storm. One farmer can have 2 inches of rain on his field, and down the road, a couple miles away, can have nothing. And that can be something that we sometimes see. So we will just kind of have to watch those things and see how they play out. But that's the two things I think I would listen to. Don't look at the percentages much, because they really don't do us a good service. They're confusing. They don't tell us a lot of details, but a lot of people look at that first. So what's the coverage, and then what's the timing? Afternoon or evening, early morning, all day. Like those types of things will, I think, make people understand that forecast a bit better.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for that advice, Jacob, and that information. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to going into some insights and advice from you. And so as we think about the future of weather forecasting, what does that look like? We spend a lot of time in agriculture talking about new technology and what's coming up. What's new in your world in weather forecasting that you maybe are excited about?
Well, it's interesting to see how AI plays a role in weather forecasting. I don't think it'll ever replace a weather forecaster. I think people still want that personal connection. And there's a lot of discussion, and I know a lot of rural areas are seeing lots of conversation, generally slanted, I think, towards the negative light on AI. We could spend some time talking about that too, but I don't know how much time you want to spend, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, we've got Casey Hedinger was on our last podcast. He was talking about AI and the benefits of it too. But yeah, from the agriculture standpoint, now the weather standpoint, I think every industry's talking about it.
Yeah, you've got to. You can't not in this thing. So some of the things that they've done with AI in weather is there's forecast models that use it. There's forecast models that are produced from it. It's not a perfect thing. It's just more data, right? And at a certain point, I think some farmers may agree with this. How much data are you going to get on your farm field to help you make decisions? You're going to get overwhelmed. So we may see a case where everything's got an AI version of a model, and then there's ensemble models and things of that. We're just adding more data to the pot. But there are some promising things. One of the things that I've been really impressed with in AI is the hurricane forecasting. It's actually become a bit more skilled in regards to that. And that's a good thing, right? Hurricanes,
100%.
big systems, 3, 4, 5, 6 days out, you can usually tell where a big system is going. There also is some promise in AI in severe weather forecasting, but again, it's not perfect. It's another tool in the toolbox. And you're not going to see responsible meteorologists just blurting out AI forecasts, right? We still have to look at the data. We still have to come up with that forecast. The easiest way I can think of it, we'll go back to 6th grade math. When you're putting something in your calculator doesn't know if you're putting in the right information. It's just taking the information you put in and calculating it out, right? That's all our weather models are doing. We give them a bunch of variables and inputs, and then it calculates it based on the equation. And it's not coming up with a forecast per se. It's coming up with an outcome. So, some of the farmers who are really into it, they're going to hear the American model, the Euro model, things of that. All of those models are technically wrong. And all of the AI models are technically wrong, but they can help us find some useful information and come up with those forecasts, right? There's things that certain models do better than others. There's things that some models are awful at. There's new models coming out, right? And so we just have to watch how much information we get and what we're going to use. But I've been impressed with some of the data that's come out on certain things. I've been not impressed in other AI things with weather. And then at the end of the day, I think the consumer, if you see the distrust with weather apps already, you got an iPhone. You got that you got an iPhone here?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What's your weather app? What you got there?
Oh, I got 3 of them, Jacob.
Yeah,
okay,
he's going to say, well, I got the WCIA 3 weather app.
Yeah,
there.
I've got that on here. That's in my favorites.
Yeah,
Yep.
There you go. Perfect. Thanks for the plug.
Yep.
Most people have the standard weather app on there, right? So you got just the one that says weather.
Yep.
There's no
Weather
one
Channel
actually putting in that data. That data is just raw data put on it. And maybe there's someone who is fine-tuning it at a regional level. So we've had times where the iPhone weather app has said it's going to be 120 degrees in central Illinois 10 days from now. Well, we know that's wrong for a myriad of reasons. Earlier, we talked about the humidity. As a meteorologist, I can sit here and say, unless we're in severe or extreme drought, no, we're not. We'll struggle to get to 100. There's things like that where those apps don't have a lot of help behind the scenes and whatnot there. So I think that the app side of things proved to us people still want a person behind the forecast. They still want that personal connection, and they're looking for it. We hear all the time, well, my app said, it's like, well, who's behind that? I don't know. It's just whatever the app is on my phone. Yeah. Well, maybe you shouldn't blindly trust a blank app on there and find an app from a station, a group, a person you trust, and roll with that and see how things are. And I always tell people to compare different apps as well. But I think that to me proves that AI won't replace weather forecasters. It's more of a tool in the toolbox. In some regards, maybe it also helps with efficiency in certain situations, but I think there always will be a need for the personal side of things. And plus, come on, Josh, when the weather forecast is wrong, people want to blame someone, and they're coming right here, I think.
Oh, yeah, they're not blaming the computer or the digital image on the screen. They're looking at Jake.
And we'll have too. Social media is full of different people sharing data and forecasts, and people read that. And then when they hear something and it didn't happen, they come right to us, oftentimes, as a very visible meteorologist and say, well, you guys missed the forecast. Where did you get that from? Well, I saw it on my app. What app? Oh, there we go. Or I saw it on social media. What social media page? I don't remember, but y'all are wrong. No.
But I saw it on there, darn it.
Yeah, I saw it. Don't believe everything you hear on the internet. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, though that's what they tell us anyway, right? Yeah. And that's probably good advice.
Yeah, I read that on Wikipedia. So.
yeah, I read it on the internet. But yeah, I appreciate that, Jacob. I love that insight. A lot of this is, once again, we're hearing things in a universal tone here on the agriculture side, on the weather and the news side of things with what you deal with as a meteorologist. The artificial intelligence, I loved your hurry up and wait earlier. Hurry up and wait is in a lot of industries. We're seeing the same thing when it comes to artificial intelligence. It's a great tool in our toolbox. But at the end of the day, a person has to make that decision. There needs to be human interaction, human intervention when it comes to that. We can use that data, but we've got to have someone to analyze and correct it. So I 100% agree, and I'm glad. It's always refreshing to hear that from multiple industries around. And so thinking, Jacob, now as we're coming to the close, if you could give every Illinois farmer one piece of weather advice for the rest of this growing season, what would that be?
I think it'll be watching the fall trends with drought. But I tell you what, in recent years, I've been really impressed with the genetics. I feel like a lot of crops, the drought-resistant genes, they've done a lot of really great work to help with that. Drought probably impacts us more early than it does later. Now, we're still probably going to see some reduced yields if drought settles on in, but it doesn't. I'm always pleasantly surprised at the end of the year when harvest is happening and there's drought. Usually farmers go in and they're very pessimistic. And then you hear a lot of, oh yeah, actually it wasn't that bad. And certain farmers are going to have certain experiences with that, et cetera.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But that's one thing I'm kind of looking for in general. I think the other thing too is to keep in mind is that weather is still a very emerging science. There's still a lot we don't know. In most other sciences, let's think of biology, right? If we're studying the human body, you can plop a human body on a table, cut it open, and start to look at what's going on inside there. We don't have the ability to do that with weather. And we have actually less data now than we did in recent years to understand what's going on in the atmosphere. We have less weather balloons that are going off around the country. That's sampling the upper air patterns. And the ones that are missing are in the upper Great Plains, which usually influence quite a bit. So that's something that I think is, having a healthy level of understanding that, okay, we're doing the best we can, but you're kind of cooking in the kitchen with the blindfold on, and you're not sure. None of the cans are labeled with, is that flour? Is that sugar? Is that salt? What is that?
So many variables.
There's so many variables. You're right. And so that's one thing there. I will say too, I think that a lot of times rainfall is the focus, but the issue with rainfall forecasts is, again, we know this. When we say, hey, a broad 1 to 2 inches, there's going to be a large amount of variability in that. A large amount of variability. And especially as we're seeing rainfall rates increase in storms for more available moisture, we may have more heavy rain events that are very localized. And one side of the county could get 3 inches in a storm, and the next side of the county, the other side, might get less than ½ inch, or even that can happen in a township, right? A couple fields in one part of the township get dumped on and soaking wet. There's so much variability in that. So hearing rainfall numbers, I think a lot of people think that's gospel. And you got to remember, storms are very indiscriminate. They just here and there. You never know exactly where they're going to be, unless it's a big system coming through, right? A big, strong, low-pressure system, a big cold front. There's a line of storms coming. But a lot of times with these summer pop-up events, that's something that we need to communicate better as well. But just that's something I would think about.
Okay, yeah, and I definitely feel like we see that all the time. My house is 4 miles away from United Prairie in Tolono, and I remember there were 2 rain events specifically that happened this spring where it was pouring at my office, United Prairie, and I called home to my wife and just asked, like, hey, how much rain are we getting at home?
0.
And she's out at the pool, and she's sitting there and she's sunbathing. She's out there and she hasn't gotten a drop of rain, and we're talking 4 miles down the road.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's kind of wild how that works, because I agree with you. I've got one of the weather apps on my phone that'll give me a rain total. And I love that to a certain extent. I have a very love-hate relationship with that app.
Yeah.
And because that rain total changes constantly.
It really does.
And it's
because
because of
that's
that.
because it's automated data that's going into there. Another guilty one is in the wintertime. Everyone wants to know how many inches of snow are we going to get. And
no one wants to go to school, Jacob. They want their e-learning day.
Yeah, you shouldn't care about the snow. You should care about the ice in the wintertime if you're trying not go to school or work. A lot of times, and I've seen this with nobody sponsors you, right? I can call companies out.
Oh, yeah, no one's sponsoring.
Like the Microsoft computers, it has it in the corner. It'll say how much snow is coming. And one, it'll either be a really large range, or two, it will jump around a bunch. But people are just getting little tidbits of information there. And, wow, it said 12 inches of snow is coming next Friday. I was like, well, that's 9 days from now, right? Or whatever the case is. Like, I don't even know what I'm having for breakfast tomorrow. Let alone this computer is saying that. And then I always tell them, follow that and see what those numbers are doing. And you're going to see those numbers jump around quite a bit because it's automated data. That's the first thing. If you see a lot of movement, it's automated. No one's there to manually look at things.
Yeah, vetting that data.
Yeah. So find someone who can do that. we will find too, sometimes with winter storms, is we tend to go under the numbers that a lot of other places are. And we tend to find that we're doing those numbers pretty well. And the reason for that is snowfall does not equal snow landing, right? Snow depth.
Yeah, accumulation, yeah.
We can definitely have 20 inches of snowfall, but after you factor in melting and compaction and some wind and, the snow growth zone's got some, the flake sizes are different, that might only be 10 inches in the ground. And we've had some events like that around here where guidance is throwing some insanely high numbers. First off, it's wrong. But number two, it's never just the snowfall number. A lot of pages love to run with that. It's like, okay, well, people aren't measuring the snow that's falling constantly. What's on the ground when the winter storm's over? Well, okay, we did have some big events around here this past winter, 6, 8, 10 inches.
Yeah.
But some of the guidance that people were throwing around was showing double and triple. And I was like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And the automated apps would sometimes say that stuff too. So find a few people you can trust, vet them, follow them, see how they're doing, see if you can trust and relate them, if they have a healthy dose of skepticism, and pick one or two and go with them. But you can listen to the others. Sometimes it's fun to look at that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Social media, think about, man, what if we did get 52 inches of snow?
Yeah, yeah. My snowblower's not going to do much to that, so we're going to be getting the tractor out of that.
But if you're, a lot of times I think we forget to grade people when they're done with their forecast. And I'll be the first to admit we've had some D's and F's in our snowfall forecast before. I remember the very first one in November. I remember the weather model. I was like, something is wrong with this. This does not look like that. And yes, the weather models were wrong, but guess what? I thought they were wrong, and that meant less snow. No, they were wrong, and meant more snow. And that's sometimes how it goes, right? You win some, you lose some. It was pretty crazy to start that first big snow. It's been a while since we had a snowy November like that. So,
correct.
Yeah, find some people, follow them, vet them, see how they do, and make sure it's someone that you can trust and be accountable with.
Awesome. And if you're listening to this show and you're not following Jacob Dickey on social media, you must be living under a rock, because he's got over 230,000 followers on Facebook. I know you just kind of started in with TikTok a little bit.
Dabbling in there.
Sounds like I saw you and Kevin posting some stuff on there.
I was bullied into that, so we're there too.
Yep, always good to get voluntold to do stuff, right? That's always fun. So, but it's great if you follow Jacob. He posts on the regular and always has great information out there, just like in this podcast. And so, Jacob, is there anything else that you want to leave people with here this afternoon?
Well, boy, that's a loaded question.
That's the most open-ended question you're going to get.
What do we miss? What do we want to cover? No, I just think it's fun to be back home in Central Illinois and forecasting, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds there. And it's been a great 6 years around here. I can't believe it's already been 6 years.
I know, that's wild, isn't it?
Geez, you and I we've known each other as acquaintances. We got to go back. I mean, I remember freshman year sitting with your brother Luke at Rantoul High School during the public speaking contest, and that was back in 2007. Time flies.
So we're almost 20 years.
Yeah, almost 2 decades of knowing the Rund family.
Oh boy, and Jacob's still here to talk with us too, which is a great thing. Yeah. So, and I'm very thankful for our relationship, Jacob. I've always cherished it, especially as I've seen you grow in our ag sector, but also here at WCIA and what you do, and we're very thankful for what you do. And I've really enjoyed this conversation today. Farmers, once again, have that love-hate relationship with the weather. So I appreciate you giving us some insight in that process, how things work. And I learned a ton today, and our listeners are going to learn even more, I know. And so I look forward to continue to watch you grow in your role here. And once again, cherish our relationship and your relationship with our ag community.
It's been a lot of fun. We'll have to next spring see how we did, right?
Let's come back. Yeah, we'll come back and revisit this.
We'll give ourselves a grade there, right?
Yeah, ourselves. I'm just going to give you the grade unless we're right. Unless I get an A, then I'll take some credit there. Yeah,
podcast break.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you, Jacob. I appreciate your time here today with us. And for everyone listening, this is exactly what Inside the Plant is all about. Real conversations, real decisions, and real insights from the professionals that we trust. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone else out there that you know. We'll be back soon with another episode of Inside the Plant, brought to you by United Prairie.